It's setting up. We're live.
Fantastic. Kia ora and good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Limited WiP Society meetup for the 22nd of October 2020. Tonight's meetup is on strategy development with the Wardley Maps, and we're very pleased to be co-hosting today's session with Ben and Daniel from Australia. Ben and Daniel co-organise the Australian Kanban Meetups in Sydney and Australia. And Ben is also the host of the Wardley Meetup in Melbourne. So we've got some great Australian Kanban Meetups in Sydney and Australia. Together, we have brought together some incredible talents from the community in Hamburg, Germany. And these talents are going to introduce us to the strategy cycle and Wardley Map and show us how to make use of these. So I would like to introduce and welcome Mathias, an Agile coach and Kanban coach. Can you give us a thanks, Mathias? Marius, an Agile coach and entrepreneur. And Florian, who comes from product management and he's currently working as a service delivery manager. So hello. I would like to kick off, and I believe I'm going to hand over to Florian.
All right, so hello from Hamburg or near Hamburg, and I will tell you together with Marius and Mathias a little bit about strategy development with Wardley Maps. I hope you can see my screen.
Yep.
My presentation.
Yep.
Yes.
All right, wonderful. So strategy development with Wardley Maps. Yeah, what are we going to do today? I have prepared a little agenda, and yeah, we start with this short introduction and the strategy cycle. Then I will tell you a bit about how to make Wardley Maps, and then we are going to dive a little bit deeper into Wardley mapping, the process of working with a Wardley map and examining landscape, climatic patterns. We will have a look at doctrine and then at gameplay. Afterwards, a few takeaways, and at the end we'll have a Q&A. Regarding questions, feel free to post questions in the chat and or to chime in and ask them. I think Pip will have a look at the chat and chime in and yeah, give me a hint if there are any questions so far that I can answer along the way. All right. I've stumbled upon a tweet a few weeks ago, which for me perfectly describes what we can use Wardley Maps for. And I would like to cite that. Developing shared mental models for a problem creates a context within which decisions can be made, exploiting the cognitive resources of the entire group. Explicit shared models assure that everyone is solving the same problem. So that's what Wardley Maps and Wardley Mapping is for me. With a Wardley Map, we have a shared artifact that everybody can look at and where we can start discussions and yeah, challenge assumptions and talk about the matter at hand. So a few notes about Simon Wardley, the creator of the technique of Wardley mapping and the Wardley Maps. Simon used to be a CIO and CEO at a small company called Fotango in the early 2000s. Went afterwards to Canonical and helped. Canonical is the parent company of the operating system Ubuntu, and there he helped to raise the market share of the operating system market for Ubuntu from 3% to 70%. And his time at Fotango was very very challenging for him, and that led him to the development of the Wardley mapping technique, because he had one problem at Fotango, being that he was the CEO of the company, but didn't really have a clue what to do and how the company should be evolving in the future. And the company was doing quite okay and didn't really have a problem. But he, for himself, realized that he didn't really know how to move along the way, and how to make or how to develop a strategy for developing the business further. So he exchanged himself with other people, and one thing he realized was that nearly everybody else was faking his way along and just working with buzzword strategies, and also quite clueless and no situational awareness or knowledge of the matter at hand. So something like this strategy was something that he encountered all the time. For example, our strategy is innovative. We will lead a customer-focused effort of the market through our use of Internet of Things and social media to build a digital business. By being both cloud-based and secure, our agile approach will drive value throughout the organization. Synergies between our ecosystem and virtual reality will enable us to capture the upside by becoming collaborative in an open world. These transformations, combined with a learning organization due to our leaders, will create an insight from data through platform and data leaders. This is no actual strategy, but a made-up strategy, which you can look up, for example, under the link I provided below on the slide. Each time you refresh that page, a new strategy will be generated and filled with buzzwords. So it's just not enough to tell a compelling story and add some fancy words in it, but you really need to know what you're doing in strategy and to get an overview of the landscape and the environment you are competing in. So that led Simon to dive a little bit deeper into strategy and the like. And the first thing he stumbled upon was The Art of War by Sun Tzu. And there he found the 5 factors which build the basis of a strategy cycle, being purpose, which is the moral imperative, the reason why we are doing things, landscape, the environment and context we move and live in, and the climate as the 3rd factor, which influences this environment. The fourth factor is doctrine, which are generally useful principles of organization. You could also call them best practices, I guess. And the 5th, in consequence, being leadership and the making decisions and moving along. He overlaid those 5 factors with the OODA loop by John Boyd, which starts with the game corresponding to the purpose, also the reason why we do things or why we engage in an activity. Then comes the first O, being observe, which targets at landscape and climate. You orient yourself then with the help of doctrine, and in the last step, through leadership, you decide what to do and act. The last element of the strategy cycle are the 2 whys, and you have 2 different whys. The first why being the why of purpose, why we do things, and the second why, the why of movement, why we engage in certain activities and rather follow one activity and neglecting another, or choosing one over the other. So this also helps with the situational awareness, and Wardley Maps, the artifact of itself, is targeted at the landscape factor. So the Wardley map presents us with an overview of the current environment and the situation in which we exist. So that leads to Wardley Maps. I like to compare the map itself with a chessboard, and because the elements on a chessboard and on a Wardley map are quite similar. If I look at the notation of party of chess, and I leave out the contextual information being the position of the pieces, then the notation becomes rather meaningless. And so I need to have the information where the pieces are located on the board to derive a strategy from the chess game. So the important factors here are, it has to be visual. I have to have context where, in relation to the other pieces, are my pieces on the board. I need to see position and movement, and that leads altogether to having a huge or a large amount of situational awareness. So I can learn how to play chess and how to get better at it and develop better strategies. I have a few examples for Wardley maps. This is the most common example or most popular example of a Wardley map, the famous tea shop example, and it describes a tea shop business. So the business serves two anchors, being the public who wants to buy a cup of tea, and the business who wants to sell a cup of tea. So for making a cup of tea, I need, of course, a cup. I need tea. I need staff to sell it. I need hot water. For hot water, I need water, a kettle, and power. So this is the value chain, and we can see that we have an X and a Y-axis. The Y-axis representing the visibility of the components to the anchors, and the X-axis being the evolution axis, determining or telling us how evolved a component on the value chain is. So we can see on this map, for example, that the kettle is in the area of custom build, which is a little bit astonishing because normally you could buy a standard kettle for not very much money nearly everywhere. And so you can now start, for example, to challenge this map and to look at it and start asking questions and, for example, challenging the fact that the kettle is custom built. So the reason for that might be that the kettle is the distinguishing factor for the business, and or maybe something the shop owner brought back from a trip to Turkey, and he loved the kettle so much, or inherited it from somewhere. Anyway, there are many possible reasons for the kettle being in the area of custom build, but we can also try and ask questions how we can, for example, maybe serve more customers. If I only have one custom built kettle, maybe it would be a good alternative to switch over to commoditized kettles or mass fabricated kettles, and therefore may be being able to grow the business, open more stores, and serve more customers. But a Wardley map doesn't always have to look as polished as that. These are also good examples of Wardley maps, and good examples for generating Wardley maps as a short scribble and working with others, and just noting the single components on the whiteboard. Another example for Wardley Maps I would like to show is from Ben Mosier. And what I would like to show here is that Wardley Maps are not static, but that they evolve. Through the addition of components and conversation with others, the map changes. And when we look at the first version, we know what he wants to do. He wants to build a mapping quick reference. He therefore needs content and display framework and hosting. And after talking to Tashin Vogelmann, there were a few elements added, like, for example, for the content, they would use templates, a standard data set, and templating framework, for example. So Wardley Map is never a static artifact, but is always evolving and changing. So in short, how do we make a Wardley map? First of all, we start with the need. And important there it is to focus on the user needs and not your own or your company needs, but determine what really serves the user. So, and the assumption is that we generate value by meeting the needs of others. So that's the first step. We determine what the user needs. Next, we need to determine which components are needed to fulfill and meet the user needs. So in this step, we build a value chain and order the components by visibility for the user. In the third step, we determine how evolved those components are. So we have for areas on the evolution axis being Genesis for completely new stuff, which is in a very early stage and very novel and unexplored. Then we have custom build, where we where these things or product services are replicated, but also quite having quite individual characteristic. Then comes a product, where we dealing with standardization and also growing competition, and the last area being commodity, where we have commoditized products that are highly standardized and like, for example, power from the wall socket. In case we are not really sure in which stage our single component is located, Simon Wardley has also provided a cheat sheet, and where you can look up and determine in which area of the evolution axis the component would fit best. In the fourth step, you work with methods and try to determine which methods are useful best for the components, and which to apply in to which component. So, for example, for commoditized components, you would try to outsource them to utility suppliers, or in case you are a utility supplier yourself, then you would use appropriate methods, like, for example, Six Sigma, to reduce deviation and reduce waste. Products in the middle, standard products, you would try to use as many. Wait, sorry, I clicked one time too much. you would try to use off-the-shelf products and, for example, use lean techniques. And in the upper left, where the sources of value and worth are located, you would try to use agile techniques and to build them in-house. And in the last step, you try and look at the map, and you try to manipulate your environment and your business and to evolve it further, and you try to gain a competitive advantage and have a look at how you can evolve and change things in your favor. So this was the process. This was how to generate a Wardley map, and the process of Wardley mapping also assembles those steps. So the first thing is, after we have a Wardley map, that we have a look at the landscape. And a Wardley map always consists of an anchor, which in this case is the customer. It shows position of the components relative to each other. And we also can anticipate movement, how things will change and evolve in the future. This exact example is the online photo service for Tango. It's from the online photo service for Tango back in 2005, I think. And that was one of the first maps that Simon Wardley generated. And there you can see the components of the online photo service business as it was past then. So the customer wanted to access the online photo service and had a few needs, which were online image manipulation, for example. They wanted to store their photos. They wanted to be able to print them or for example, mouse pads or T-shirts. They needed a website for that, which itself relied on a CRM and a platform. Those elements related to compute and, of course, a data center and the least visible and most commoditized thing, power. So these were the essential components, and you always have to look out to not include too many components on a map. It's a little bit like reduced to the max. So you have to look out for the most essential elements that you need to represent on that map to be able to solve your problem. So next thing is that you have climatic patterns, which have an effect on the landscape and your environment and yourself. So climatic patterns are patterns that are also widely observable, a little bit like standard things or most common things that you really have no choice about. For example, everything evolves through demand, supply and demand competition. So as soon as you move in the market and have a product in the market and have competition, then it is nearly inevitable that components evolve, because somebody builds, for example, a car with electric motor instead of a combustion engine. And so you always forced to also evolve so that you can keep up with the pace. Problem there is that you suffer from inertia, which is due to past success. So if you were very successful, like for example Volkswagen with combustion engines in the past, they have inertia to change and need some competitor, like for example Tesla, to convince them that they need to move forward also. Through the process of evolution, you also gain efficiency, which on the other hand then enables innovation, and together with the fact that everything evolves and you gain efficiency, you can then develop higher order systems which create new sources of value. And yes, so these are a few climatic patterns, the most important four. There are a few more, nearly 40 in total, I think. Another important one is no one size fits all. Means that you should not inflict one single method on the whole company, because depending on what matter you are dealing with and in which area of the evolution axis this component or factor is located, you need to utilize different techniques and methods. So as I mentioned before, when you are dealing with a highly commoditized component, you are best on the way using Six Sigma. When you use standard products, you go with Lean, and for new stuff, and you use agile techniques and try to build them in-house. So this is the table of climatic patterns, which Simon generated. So I've highlighted the 5 that we dealt with already. Everything evolves through supply and demand competition. No single method fits all. Higher order systems create new sources of value. Efficiency enables innovation, and success breeds inertia. There are a few more important ones. For example, characteristics change as components evolve, which is due to the fact that when something is on the very far left of the Wardley map, it has a different characteristic as when it is located on the very far right. Because on the far left we have novel things. They are rare, they are new, they are unchallenged, and on the very far left we have very established things, very common, widely available, and a lot of people know how to deal with it. We have no choice over evolution. As soon as we suffer from competition, there will always be evolution, and we have to react to that. So the next thing in the process of Wardley mapping is, and in the strategy cycle, that we deal with doctrine. A short question, Pip, are there already questions?
We've had a really interesting query from Hendrik on our live stream. He's just querying, would this work, or how would this work for a service instead of a product?
The question again, please. How this would work?
How would it work? How would mapping work for a service instead of a product that is being delivered?
Okay. Wardley mapping works as well for a service as it does for a product, because we also we can determine the stage of evolution also for a service, and we can also determine what we need to provide, the service. So Wardley mapping works for nearly everything. Yeah. I hope that answers
also jump in.
Yeah, sure.
Yes, from my point of view, it's also made for services because you are trying to meet a real customer's need with a service. And you have also some components. Maybe we are talking about the pizza delivery service, for example, not about the pizza, but about the service. And then you have different components, and they are at a different stage, for example, and they are evolving. And maybe you can just use some cars to bring the pizza to some guys, or maybe you want to have an electric scooter or something like this, which is maybe some other kind of location. It's not maybe not commodity as a car. Maybe it's just a new rising product which you use to make your service even more environment friendly or something like this. These are just all decisions, strategic decisions you can make. And I think maybe that's an example just from my point of view.
Okay, I hope that answers the question. If not, I would like, what was the name, Henrik, I think? I would like to ask the Henrik to post the question maybe a little bit more, with a little bit more detail. All right, so the next thing we deal with, as I said, on the strategy cycle and the process of Wardley mapping is doctrine. So we remember that doctrine are generally useful principles for organizing an organization, and that you can rely on and make use of. So a few of those principles are, for example, focus on user needs, which is, I think, the most important one. Whereas I just read a tweet from Simon last night, where he talked about the fact that it doesn't, or it is not sufficient to just focus on user needs, and that this topic is evolving, and he will revise his doctrine table in the near future. And so I'm very, very keen on finding out how this will change. But anyway, for the moment being, and I think that's still very valid, the most important thing is to focus on user needs. Next thing, for example, is to think fast and inexpensive, restrained and elegant. To think small, for example, as in teams. I think the 2 pizza teams from Amazon are quite famous. And to use appropriate methods, which also relies to the climatic pattern that no single method fits all. And so you have to use the appropriate methods in your organization, depending on what kind of component, in which kind, or in which stage of the evolution you are dealing with. So this is the table with the doctrine list, with the 4 doctrines we just covered highlighted, and there are also a few more, like, for example, be transparent, which means that you should be as open as possible, and also the Wardley map is a prominent example for that. If you have a Wardley map and you share it with others and you invite them to challenge and discuss your actual state of knowledge, then you can also involve, because you spark a discussion and challenge your assumptions. Another one being use a common language necessary for collaboration. It is quite common that, for example, finance and IT don't understand each other, and which makes it sometimes quite complicated for them to work together. And there's also a thing, a point where a Wardley map can be of use, because you again have a single artifact. And if you look at the map and you know how a map looks like, you immediately have the common language. For example, if I talk about the upper left or the lower right, everybody knows, if he knows how a Wardley map looks like, what I'm talking about. Think small, again, not only in teams, but also as to know the details. So the better your knowledge of matters and facts is, the more advantage you have. And to provide purpose, mastery, and autonomy, like Daniel Pink drive. And wait, I can see. Think aptitude and attitude, meaning that you have to have the right people in the right positions, and the right skills at hand. And of course, that you design for constant evolution. So these are, Simon Wardley also says that before you try to inflict too many changes, or to make too quick reactions, you have to fix your doctrine first, meaning that you have to have the right organizational principles established throughout your organization. So the last step is the act of leadership or gameplay. And that is the question, for example, where to invest. Coming back to the online photo service, which was doing quite well, as Simon said, but they could anticipate that soon they would have competitors, and the whole thing of or the main business would move further right, become more evolved, and so it was already visible that there were changes ahead, and changes to the business model, and they would need a new strategy. So they were confronted with the question, where should they invest, or where should they make strategic investments, and what should they rely upon as a future business? So you have quite a few areas where you could invest. For example, on top, the main business at that time, or maybe everywhere where compute is, and the data processing was taking place. And yeah, I have multiple points where possible investments could be made.
We have a question for you, Florian. It
Yeah.
is from Maru. Must these two axes really always be the same? It seems to be quite limiting.
No, they don't. It is quite common to use different descriptions for the evolution axis, and you also don't have to have a y-axis at all. The y-axis, the visibility, is only an aid, and it helps people starting out with mapping. And if you don't want to use it, you don't have to. And regarding the x-axis, there are a few other quite common descriptions for the different stages, which are also interchangeable. There is a table or an overview by Simon with the possible names and descriptions, and it depends on what you're dealing with, whether you're dealing with data, with the knowledge, or with products, services, whatever. You also can map ethical or political things and just change the axis description. It is also quite common to not use genesis, custom built, product, or commodity, but just use the Roman numerals 1, 2, 3, and 4, and just to make, or just to represent that there is an evolution taking place, which you can also see in, for example, knowledge or politics, whatever. I hope that answers that question.
And
otherwise,
addition,
just
sorry, Florian. And in addition,
go
we had
ahead.
another question from Anthony. and he was asking if, for example, a power supplier, if he's commodity all the time, or if you look into the company of itself, maybe he's also dealing with some agile things, for example. Maybe he wants to try out some solar power generator or whatever. And I hope I said it right, Anthony. Otherwise, please interrupt me or correct me, please. And from my perspective, it's a matter of the anchor. So if you are with your company, you are trying to deserve a customer need, and you are just want the power be there in your company, and you want to plug some plugs in, and that's just a outsourced thing, because you just pay the bill for your power supplier. And if you're zooming in the company of the power supplier, then there's another anchor, because the power supplier will serve another need. And it's not your need of your customers, but it's the customer needs of the power supplier. So, and for sure, he's allowed to experiment, if you want to say so. And for sure, there are things which are evolving and so. And but I think it's important where the need is. For example, if I don't know, I have no example right at hand, but for me, power is really a commodity. I expect 99% availability, for example, and if my power supplier would experiment, I want him that the 99% availability is guaranteed for sure. So, and maybe some startup could experiment and they say, oh, we are just in a beta version or alpha version or something like this, then I don't expect the 99% availability, for example. So maybe that helped, Anthony.
Yeah, the original question actually was, talking about the different methods of managing. So, you talk about managing the stuff that's in Genesis and custom with agile methods, and product and commodity with lean or Six Sigma methods. But the question is sort of managed from whose perspective. So if I'm purchasing, if I'm building this thing, but I'm purchasing data center, I'm purchasing power, I'm not really managing those servers. So I'm just trying to understand what that managing perspective is.
So is that thought around the visibility to invisibility? All right, that visibility is from whose perspective? It's the customer's perspective, right? So the stuff that is up the top, the actual power, for example, is it's a commodity, but it's and that's what's at the visible end of the spectrum. But all the things that sit below it might be further to the left, but they're further down, more towards invisible to the customer, right?
Yeah, what is also quite notable is that each component can also be a map of its own. So that came out in the discussion just, or in the questions right now. When you are the power provider yourself, then you have a completely unique map for the power generation and the whole business, and you can dive into nearly every component and build a map of its own.
So if you think of everything like fractals, and that they get smaller and smaller, which is why, in order to make sense of this, I was trying to find a tool that might really help, and I came across kumu.io, and in fact, Simon Wardley and what's his name, Ben Moisier, actually set up a template in kumu.io specifically for Wardley mapping, because you can do infinite zoom in and infinite zoom out, so you can follow that fractal pattern again with the lens of visible, invisible, and the maturity of the stage of the product or component.
That sounds great. Very interesting.
And just sort of a kind of a related question: is the position of the anchor meaningful? So, in other words, electricity as the output from the power company's perspective, they're providing it as a commodity, but I guess other organizations may be providing their thing in the frame of a product or even in the frame of custom build and Genesis. So, is that meaningful?
The anchor should always be on top, but doesn't necessarily have to be. For example, the map of mapping, which I used for the very first intro slide, there the anchor is located, nearly at the top, but not at the topmost.
And if you're talking about the x-axis, for me, it's very important because I think if you want to have context and a landscape, then you should think about, okay, is this need evolving? Maybe it's about electric scooter or something like this, or is this need already evolved? It's commodity. It's a commodity need, maybe power supply or power. Power point.
All right. Questions answered so far? Okay, then I just carry on. We were at the point where we have to make strategic decisions and to ask ourselves where would it be best to invest. And that was also the question that Simon Wardley was or found himself confronted with in 2005 when he looked for future for his business. So you then can apply also gameplay, context-specific gameplays. And he also, for example, or a few examples here, he always finds it quite useful to apply open approaches, and another one being fear, uncertainty, and doubt. So what does that mean at the question at hand for Tango? He decided to move the platform from product into commodity by building a platform as a service service. So to provide his future customers with as many applications and users for the platform as possible, he open sourced it and invited other developers to develop applications for that platform. And being 2005, he utilized the insecurity of other players in the market with fear, uncertainty, and doubt, that they were not really sure whether cloud services or generally platform as a service services were already a thing, and was actually the first platform as a service who made a platform widely accessible in I think 2006 with a company called Zimkey. And but that unfortunately, although Zimkey was quite successful, they ceased operation in 2007 because the parent company of Fotango and Zimkey didn't want to pursue the endeavors any further, and so the company had to close, although it was quite profitable and had a growing customer base. But what we can learn from that is that he changed the business model completely from operating an online photo service to providing a platform as a service and providing applications for other users and customers. So that's like, for example, with Nokia. Nokia also, I think they made shoes at one time, and then became providers of network hardware and than manufacturers of smartphones and all mobile phones, not smartphones. That's the thing that they missed. Yes, so you always have to look and see how you can make changes to your services, your products, your business, and by orienting yourself in the landscape and seeing what you can make use of to gain strategic advantages or maybe to reinvent yourself. Also, Simon has a list for context-specific play, also about 40 things or 40 items where you can have a look at and determine what might be suitable to utilize for your service and in your market. So back to the strategy cycle. We just went one time around, and so what you do is you decide on your strategy, you act, and then you reiterate that strategy cycle and repeat it as often and fast as possible. The faster you can go through that strategy cycle, the better you can react to changing conditions and to a changing environment. So a few takeaways. It's not about the maps. It's about the conversations that you have around those maps, the challenges, the interactions with others, because only if you work together in a group and try to work together with as many people as possible, you really can generate valuable insights and develop the best, most strategy for your product, service, or business. Another overview, so where you use Wardley Maps and Wardley Mapping makes use of quite a few different things. You observe, you communicate, you take action, you learn, you have patterns and challenges and the scenarios at hand, and you have something that helps you make the best decisions. There's one important quote from Simon that I don't want to leave out here. All maps are imperfect and all models are wrong, and someone will always make a better map. Don't forget that. It's not perfect and it's not about perfection. It's just about making things visible and to gain situational awareness and an overview of the challenges at hand. So how do you learn strategy with Wardley mapping? First of all, you can learn to read maps, which is relatively easy. You can learn to make maps, which is medium difficult, gets better the more you do it, and learn to use maps. And in the process of Wardley mapping, which is not very easy and takes a lot of sustained effort, but the best thing is just to go and do it, because as you move along the way, the better you get. Another possibility, you can learn the strategy cycle by reading or by learning the works of Sun Tzu and John Boyd. You can learn landscape by reading and making maps. Learn and use climatic patterns, the same for doctrine, and at last, gameplay. Simon himself has a few recommendations. He recommends the course by the Leading Edge Forum or the Pragmatic Wardley Mapping course by Ben Mosier. There's also a wonderful list over at GitHub with some Wardley mapping resources, and of course his book, which is freely available on Medium for you to read. Not quite finished yet, but with I think already 18 or 19 chapters, and a valuable resource. So brings me to the last point on the agenda, which is question and answers. So feel free to hit us up.
All the
If
great
any-
works to you, Florian, in the chat. I don't know if you can see the chat. People saying great presentation. Thank you very much. Really good.
Cool. Welcome. Very welcome. Pleasure.
Thanks. It's a bit overwhelming. It's the first time I see this, and there's a lot to it.
Yes, definitely. It took me.
I mean, you pick it up mapping, and it's you pick it up like that. It takes a bit more training, I reckon, and a bit more using.
Definitely. It took me years to dive deeper into this stuff. But I thought when I saw it for the first time, I have just found it fascinating and near genius. And then I dug a little bit deeper, but to understand how those things and the single steps of the Wardley mapping process and the strategy cycle are related takes quite a bit of time. But it's worth the time.
Exactly, and the good thing is you can start right away. There's no right or wrong. You're just getting better and better. So there's no need to wait years to begin. Just jump in and start and discover your way through.
I agree. I mean, even if you just start thinking about that concept, not everything has to be purpose built. And just thinking about these concepts, no matter how embryonic, will generate some good discussion and some challenging, which is always good.
Yeah.
Florian, we've had another question in the chat window from Rahul in India. In the tea shop example, why is the cup of tea not custom built, but a product on the x-axis?
It's a good question. First of all, I would say because Simon put it there. We can think about that and discuss it. Probably because the cup of tea, the cup, is available at other stores and quite common. I will figure that in England you have quite a few tea stores. So that would probably be the reason. But you can also, for example, if you have a mouth-blown, hand-painted cup and homegrown tea leaves from the winter garden or glass house, it might be in a different area. It depends on how common the thing is that you provide. So if your tea and the cup you serve it in look nearly like the ones over at Starbucks, I would say it's in the very far right of product.
So Florian, is the question there, is it also not only about how the organization can produce said product or item, but also the market's ability to understand the item in terms of how they would use it, how they would consume it?
Yes, for example, you would if you would put an iPhone on the Wardley map in comparison to an Android smartphone, the iPhone would be in another area of the evolution axis, because the iPhone provides you with a different user experience, for example, as an Android smartphone, which is also a reason why Apple can charge a higher price for an iPhone. So you can differentiate yourself by putting things in different stages of the evolution axis.
We've got another couple of questions for you, Florian. First one, what empirical evidence do we have about how well Wardley Maps work and which domains they work best in?
Oh, good question. I don't know. Better ask Simon, I think. I know that Mark Craddock from the United Nations uses them. I know that they were used in some government projects in Great Britain. but I don't have any empirical evidence at hand. Sorry.
And we know that some startups here in Hamburg are using Wardley Maps. And I know from my own experience that some bigger companies which are operating worldwide are using Wardley Maps. So it's a tool which you can use by your own if you want to evolve your own business, your one-man show, or you can evolve your whole big worldwide company, or even a state if you would like.
And yeah, Amazon or Adrian Cockcroft at Amazon Web Services uses Wardley Maps.
Oh, Helen tells us that she believes Spark New Zealand is also using Wardley Maps.
Huh?
Thanks,
It
Helen.
gains traction. It's definitely getting some more attention, and it's getting more widespread.
Maru, the owner of that question, would also like to know, how do you use Wardley Maps in product development and agile teams? At which level?
What was the last bit? Sorry.
At what level?
At what level? I know that my company, a few departments use Wardley Maps for product management, and I do it also myself to generate an overview and just to have a representation of the states the components of my individual services are in, and to anticipate change. For example, I work in IT infrastructure, dealing with client devices and client device services, and the thing, bring your own devices, for example, thing, and the question. And when you look at IT infrastructure in the past 20 years, there already have been quite a few changes, and in the way that you provide those services for your customers, and that you can also, and so to be able to predict or anticipate, not predict, anticipate the future, Wardley Maps can be really of help.
And in addition, I experienced one agile product development team in the software development, which used all the Wardley Maps to differentiate themselves from the competitors, for example. So they generated a Wardley map for 2 competitors, and they also said, okay, what do we have to change? Where are they evolving to or towards which maybe sector of the x-axis? And then you could do a better or more informed decisions. And you can provide the purpose and the why, because maybe just one hint that strategy is the movement. In most companies I experienced, strategy is just a PowerPoint and maybe a meeting. And what's missing in most cases from my experience is, first of all, the context. What are we in? And what components, even on high level, are depending on each other, and where are we now? Maybe you can just grab into your strategies from your companies. The thing is, where are we now, and why do we want to move there? That's mostly missing from my experience.
My experience, what has been mostly missing, I spent 7 years in strategy consulting and technology, and had and what is mostly missing is the strategy itself, which is, how do I get to what goal, and what are my various paths across this labyrinth of possibilities, or endless number of possibilities. At best, you get one-time strategy snapshot in time thrown at your face, associated with a huge investment in a big transformation. So you put all your eggs in one basket, and at best maybe 3-4 additional tactics in how to deal with particular aspects and optimize micro pockets of challenges, and that's it. And that's what people call 500 decks, slide decks of strategy, and engage the whole organization in 3 years transformations upon. That's what is taught at MBA schools.
Yeah.
And that's a problem because you have you don't have situational awareness. You just have buzzwords and a lot of stories.
And in addition, the problem is that you have to go more deeper into detail. You can have a high-level strategy for sure. You can say, hey, we want to be more agile, whatever. And the missing part, as you mentioned, or as I understood, is that nobody has a clue how. And this how is the most important part for the levels beneath, because maybe the CEOs don't have all the situational awareness or all the knowledge about each context. They just know, okay, we have to move there, for example, and all the other parts should do the inspection, and they should generate a landscape, and they should generate the whole value chain from their perspective, and apply the how, so the movement, so to say, how they want to achieve the certain point.
The how is one big blind spot there, but also how to play the game. What are the possible follow-up moves? And then how to update them, because on a slide deck, you can't do it. Plus, whenever you try to do stuff like that, it's too complex, too overblown. Nobody's going to understand it. Stop there. So nobody does real strategy. If you look at other ways to do strategy, which are playbooks, if you look at basketball coaches, football coaches, playbooks, that's exactly what they try to do. Just watch what playbooks are open and published about basketball playbooks games. You will see they draw similar things to Wardley Maps, but just on a basketball court.
Yeah.
Again, situational awareness. All right. Any further questions?
There was the question before if you can share the slides.
Yeah, definitely. I just wanted to say a few more words on the slides. I have created a PDF. I would send it to Ben if I can not upload it myself to the meet update or meetup event, and I've included a little bit more. I just want to walk through that in a few seconds. I have included a bonus on doctrine, a different presentation of Simon's doctrine patterns, and where you can have a look at a link for Doctrine Online, where you can incorporate the doctrine patterns and have a look how well the doctrine patterns are, for example, present in your organization. I have included a few resources like learnwardleymapping.com, Simon's books, the book from Eric Schoen, which is also highly recommended. The courses, a great talk by Kat Switel on how to start mapping. A few YouTube playlists, one in German for German speakers, one in general playlist, and two more. The two YouTube channels, one by Ben Moja and the other one the Wardley Map channel. And that's wait, sorry. You can also contact us on Twitter, and we would be happy if you'd reach out to us and get in touch. I will load up the slides as a PDF, and that was it from me. Thank you for having me.
Brilliant. Well done. Thank you.